Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode from DGMZ diwan-e-ghalib-meri-zubaani. This episode is a continuation to the DGMZ Miniseries, first of its kind, that we are running currently. The miniseries is dedicated to the immortal love story of Layla-e-Majnun. We already have a great detailed introduction episode to the story, plus 3 episodes posted in the playlist. So feel free to access those. Today is the 4th episode in this mini series. If you've been with me in the previous episodes, you would know that for this mini series, we are narrating the story from a book, in addition to other things like exploring the story via art and paintings and Sher Urdu poetry. So today we are going to do the narration from chapter 11 onwards. We completed chapter 10 in the last episode. Before I start the narration, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Suluk Press Publishing House for allowing us to narrate from their publication titled The Story of Layla-e-Majnun by Nizami, translated from the Persian and edited by Rudolph Gelpke. English version in collaboration with E. Matin and G. Hill. Final chapter translated from the Persian by Pirzia Inayat Khan and Omid Safi. Description of this episode has the link to this book for viewers who want to own a copy. Also, you will find links to the DGMZ Ghazal episodes where Ghalib mentions Layla-e-Majnun. We will post that also in the description box of this episode. Okay, so with that, let's get into the narration. Start of narration. The story of Layla-e-Majnun, chapter 11. When the old Sayyid had thus poured out all the hopes and sorrows stored up in his heart, Majnun could remain silent no longer, and this was his reply. Start of quotes. You, whose majesty equals that of heaven itself, King of all our dwelling places, inhabited or deserted, pride and glory of all Arabs, I kneel before you. I have received my life from you. May you never lose your own, and may I never lose you. Your words are scorching me. Yet, what can I do? I, the man with the blackened face, have not chosen the way I have been cast onto it. I am manacled, and my fetters, as you say, are made of iron. But it was not I who forged them. It was my fate, my kismet, that decided. I cannot loosen them. I cannot throw off my burden. Not of its own does the shadow fall into the depth of the well. Not by its own power does the moon rise in the sky to its zenith. Wherever you look, from ant to elephant, you will find no object or creature which is not ruled by fate. Who therefore could remove the load of stone from my heart? Who could wash away the disaster which is crushing me, which I have not chosen? I am carrying the burden which has been put on my shoulders and cannot throw it off. You keep asking me, why do you never laugh? But tears rather than laughter become the sufferer. If I were to laugh, it would be as if lightning and thunder were laughing as they broke the clouds. The fire burning inside me would scorch my lips, and I would perish in the furnace of my mirth. Here Majnu interrupted himself and told this story to the Sayyid. The fable of the partridge and the ant. There was once a partridge, which, when hunting, spied an ant and seized it in its beak, one of the ant's legs. It was just about to swallow it when the ant laughed and shouted, "Partridge, to laugh as I do, that's one thing you are not capable of." The partridge was greatly upset. It did not stop to think. It just opened its beak to laugh heartily and said, "Really, it is my turn to laugh and not yours." But by that time, the ant had escaped from the reopened prison, and the silly partridge was left alone in the field. Start of quotes. Man, if he laughs at the wrong time, will fare no better. He will regret with tears that he laughed too soon. End of quotes. The story of Layla-e-Majnun, Chapter 12. I also, Majnu continued, have no reason to laugh. Even the old donkey does not throw down its burden before death takes it away. Why then should it fear death? You warned me, father, but what lover goes in fear of the sword? A man in love does not tremble for his life. He who searches for his beloved is not afraid of the world. Where is this sword? Let it smite me, as the cloud has swallowed my moon. My soul has fallen into the fire, and even if it hurts to lie there, no matter, it was good to fall. Leave my soul alone. It is destroyed. It is lost. What do you want from it? When the old man heard this, he shed bitter tears, and smarting with pain, took his disturbed son home. There the family nursed him, comforting him as best they could. They also called on his former friends and entrusted the child of sorrow to their care. But for Majnu, they were all strangers. Life at home was one prolonged torture to him, and all who saw him felt tears come into their eyes. How could they help such a heart? For 2 or 3 days, Majnu bore the strain. Then he tore down the curtain which his friends had put up to protect him, and escaped once more into the desert of Najd. Like a drunken lion, roamed restlessly about in this desolate country of sands and rocks. His feet became as hard as iron, the palms of his hands like stone. He wandered through the mountains, chanting his ghazals. But how strange! Even if Majnu was mad, his verses were not. Even if people heaped abuse and shame on him, they could find no fault in his verses. Many came from near and far to hear the minstrel in his mountain retreat. Listening eagerly and loving what they heard, they wrote down his poems and took them away to the farthest horizons. Some became lovers themselves. The story of Layla and Majnun, chapter 13. In the meantime, Layla had grown daily more beautiful. The promise of the bud had been kept by the blossom. Half an enticing glance from her eyes would have been enough to conquer 100 kings. She could have plundered Arab or Turk had she wanted. Nobody could escape such a huntress. With her gazelle's eyes, she caught her victims and tied them with the rope of her tresses. Even a lion would have bent his neck gracefully under such a yoke. A flower was Layla's face. Anyone who looked at her felt hungry for the honey of her lips and turned beggar for her kisses. But her eyelashes refused to give alms and said, start of quotes, "May God grant you what you desire. I shall give nothing." End of quotes. Those who had been caught by the noose of her locks were chased away by the darts of her eyelashes. Her body was like a cypress tree, on which the pheasant of her face was sitting in majesty. Hundreds of lost hearts had already fallen into the well of her dimples. But our beauty took pity on those who had lost their footing and threw them her tresses as a rope to the rescue. So powerful was the spell of Layla's beauty. Yet, this enchantress could not help herself. Seen from outside, she seemed to blossom. Inside, she shed tears of blood. Secretly, she was looking for Majnun from morning till night. And at midnight, when nobody could hear, her sighs were calling him. Her laughter was born of tears, like the light of a candle. And out of all they saw, her eyes formed the image of her beloved. Like Majnun, ever since their separation, she also burned in the fire of longing. But her flames were hidden, and no smoke rose from them. Layla, too, had her mirror of pain, like the one which the doctor holds in front of a dying man's mouth, to see whether a breath of life still clouds the glass. But Layla's mirror was her own soul, which in her loneliness she questioned about her beloved. With whom else could she talk about the thoughts which filled her heart? At night, she told the secret to her shadow. She lived between the water of her tears and the fire of her love, as if she were a pari, a fairy, hovering between fire and water. Though devoured by sorrow, Layla would not have told her grief for anything in the world. Sometimes, when no one was awake, the fountains of the moon made her step outside. There she stood, her eyes fixed on the path, waiting. For whom? Did she hope that a messenger might pass by or even call upon her? But only the wind blowing from the mountains of Najd brought a breath of faith from a lonely man or drove a cloud across whose rain was, for Layla, a greeting from afar. Yet her lover's voice reached her. Was he not a poet? No tent curtain was woven so closely as to keep out his poems. Every child from the bazaar was singing his verses. Every passerby was humming one of his love songs, bringing Layla a message from her beloved, whether he knew it or not. Now Layla was not only a picture of gracefulness, but also full of wisdom and well versed in poetry. She herself, a pearl unpierced, pierced the pearls of words, threading them together in brilliant chains of poems. Secretly, she collected Majnu's songs as they came to her ears, committed them to memory, and then composed her answers. These she wrote down on little scraps of paper, heading them with the words, start of quotes, Jasmine sends this message to the cypress tree, end of quotes. Then, when no one was looking, she entrusted them to the wind. It happened often that someone found one of these little papers and guessed the hidden meaning, realizing for whom they were intended. Sometimes he would go to Majnu, hoping to hear, as a reward, some of the poems which had become so popular. And true enough, there was no veil which could hide his beloved from Majnu. He answered at once in verse, and whoever received the message saw to it that Layla should hear it at once. Thus, many a melody passed to and fro between the two nightingales, drunk with their passion. Those who heard them listened in delight, and so similar were the two voices that they sounded like a single chant. Born of pain and longing, their song had the power to break the unhappiness of the world. End of narration. So, those were three very interesting chapters. And now let's get into a very brief impression of these chapters, just to enjoy the highlights or the messages that came through. So chapter 11. I have mentioned in one of the previous episodes that Majnu, when in conversation, especially with his father, talks like a very wise man. A wise man who has not inherited wisdom, probably, but has actually gathered wisdom thanks to this experience he's going through in love. Love has made him very wise about many a thing, which to a normal person might not even register, forget about making sense. So he talks to his father in chapter 11 about his helplessness, right? About his helplessness in front of fate and destiny, who have somehow written a great amount of love in his so-called kismat, but also a great amount of pain. And he tells his father that I'm helpless in front of this. He says, I'm manacled, and my fetters, chains, as you say, are made of iron, but it was not I who forged them. It was my fate, my kismat, that decided. Wherever you look from ant to elephant, you will find no object or creature which is not ruled by fate. So yeah, he's trying to explain to his father, and we did go through this in the previous episodes also, that the father is still assuming that the choice lies with Majnu. The choice was made by Majnu to be like this, and the choice to not be like this also lies with Majnu. And what Majnu is trying to explain to his father is that that's not correct. That's not correct. The choice does not lie with me. And then again in this chapter, we see Majnu's immense wisdom as he analyzes the advice the father is giving him, that the father is giving him. He analyzes it and deduces that the advice from the father is inaccurate or unviable. It's not doable. And like many a wise ones have done, Majnu uses a simple story to explain a complex doctrine, right? We've seen it done by prophets, we've seen it done by the Messiah, we've seen it done by so many people. When you are trying to explain a very complex doctrine or phenomena, you pick up a very simple example to do it. And he gives that ant and partridge story. The story is very, very simple. The story is easily understood, but it is Majnu's quote after that, which hits home. So this is what he says to his father: "You keep asking me, why do you never laugh?" And माँ बाप का कितना टिपिकल एक इंस्टिंक्ट होता है ना, खुश रहो खुश रहो खुश. कैनॉट ब्लेम द फादर, राइट? माँ बाप बच्चे के चेहरे पे एक शिकन देखते तो उनको घबराहट होने लगती, भाई क्या बात है ना, क्यों, क्या बात है. और यहाँ पे तो कितना बुरा हाल है बच्चे का. तो बाप और कुछ नहीं मांगता है, सिर्फ यही मांगता है, बेटा तू हंस, तू खुश रहे, खुशी की तरफ अपने को बढ़ा, कोशिश कर. एंड मजनू टेल्स हिम, man, if he laughs at the wrong time, will fare no better. He's referring to the partridge. He will regret with tears that he laughed too soon. There's a lot of wisdom in this. We can go to town with this, but very briefly put, Majnu is trying to tell his father that don't force me to fake, or don't force me to behave in a way which is exactly opposite to what I am feeling. Even though in your mind you think that the behavior you are advising me to do or indulge in is the right thing to do, but it clashes with what I'm feeling. I feel like crying. And you are asking me to laugh. And I'm telling you, if I, or for that matter anybody, laughs at a time when they were supposed to cry, they will regret that laugh. Right? You simply put, you should not put up a show which is so much in clash with what you are internally feeling. थोड़ा बहुता में भी बट आप अंदर से 6 फील कर रहे हो और 9 दिखा रहे हो, according to Majnu, that's not a good strategy. That's not a good strategy. That's not wise, because it will come back to bite you. It will come back to bite you. Now moving on to in chapter 12. And that is why we wanted to do this mini-series, right? As the story is evolving, one is realizing, yes, at the center the story is a love story about Layla and Majnu. But look at the father and son relationship. So many aspects of it. Child is the father of the man. You see that play out in this in this book by Nizami, and of course this particular fantastically done translated version by Rudolph Gelpke, right? So in chapter 12 we see Majnu slowly and patiently introducing his father to the concept of a lover and love, as Majnu knows it, as Majnu believes it, as Majnu lives it. Not an easy conversation to have with your parent. And this is not that simple scenario where the child loves someone which the parent doesn't like. It's not that simple. The child loves someone who he can never have, and the child is almost self-destructing himself as he continues to love this someone he cannot have. Totally different scenario, totally different level. So the father justifiably is very worried, and does not believe that this love is of any good. No matter how powerful and pure and ruhani it is, the father believes it is destroying his child, killing his child. And this is how, and he also believes that the child is endangered. The child is in danger because the prefect of the caliph has almost told Layla's tribe, those two representatives, that use your sword and fix this problem. If Majnu is such a thorn in your side, use the sword and fix the problem. So the father is now genuinely worried for the safety of Majnu. But slowly and patiently, this is what Majnu tells his father about love and being a lover. You warned me, father, but what lover goes in fear of the sword? A man in love does not tremble for his life. He who searches for his beloved is not afraid of the world. My soul has fallen into the fire, and even if it hurts to lie there, no matter, it was good to fall. So Majnu is trying to almost educate his father about how different the rules of the game are when the game is that of love. Safety is not the priority. Security is not the priority. Comfort is not the priority. Victory is not the priority. The priority is totally different. Also, in this chapter, Nizami very, very nicely introduces us to Majnu the minstrel. बहुत eloquently और बहुत प्यारी तरह इस बात को describe किया है. This is what Nizami writes. Even if Majnu was mad, his verses were not. Many came from near and far to hear the minstrel in his mountain retreat. They wrote down his poems and took them away to the farthest horizons. Some became lovers themselves. So that phenomena of making you fall in love with love, right? So Nizami calls Majnu the minstrel of the mountains of Najd. Now, minstrel are these, or used to be these medieval singers or musicians, especially ones who sang or recited lyric or heroic poetry to a musical group of nobility. They could be musicians, jugglers, acrobats, singers, etc. But after 16th century, they kind of became specialized as entertainers who sang songs and played musical instruments. Their songs would tell stories of distant places, existing or imaginary, and also historical events. So, of course, Majnu here is singing about his own story. And more importantly, he's singing about his love, Layla, right? Or his love for his beloved Layla. So it's a very nice form of Majnu, which you otherwise would miss. But Nizami highlights it. Moving on to chapter 13. So, in my humble opinion, for people like us who had a very typical mindset about the story of Layla and Majnun, a very typical and siloed mindset, this chapter is very enlightening. Because होता क्या है कि Layla's end of the story is not part of the usual narrative. When people talk about Layla Majnun, लैला की तरफ की कहानी जो है बहुत छोटी है, बहुत कम डिटेल में है, एंड क्यों ना हो, she chose the path of silence. Right, she chose the path of silence. She was forced to choose the path of silence, anonymity, secrecy, keeping quiet. She was forced to walk the path of internalizing the grief. तो जब ना वो बोलती थी ना उसके आसपास वाले बोलते थे कुछ भी इस कहानी के बारे में. Vis-a-vis Majnu, who chose the path of extreme vocalization to the limits of madness and frenzy, right? But ये chapter काफ़ी important है from the perspective of getting insights into what was happening at Layla's end. And I love that about Nizami, right? He is moving with both the characters with equal focus and detail. So chapter 13 is very good in terms of figuring out Layla as a person. And Nizami gives Layla two very distinct forms. One form is for the world, for everyone. It includes the people who are bewitched by her, it includes her family, her girlfriends, her friends, everybody near and far. एक उसका रूप उनके लिए है. And then there is this one Layla, which Nizami details, which is for herself. The roop of that Layla is for herself. And that roop, that form of Layla is very firmly embedded in her love for Majnu. So, आप ये भी कह सकते हो कि ये रूप लैला का जो है वो उसके लिए है, या ये रूप लैला का उसके और मजनू के लिए है. सिर्फ nobody has access to this part or this form of Layla. And जो बाहर के लिए है बुक में I've just narrated, but जो मजनू के लिए है, मजनू की जो लैला है वो कैसी है. दुनिया की जो लैला है वो तो ठीक ही है, बहुत ही प्यारी, बहुत खूबसूरत. मजनू की लैला कैसी है? Outside she seemed to blossom. Inside she shed tears of blood. Secretly she was looking for Majnu from morning till night. At midnight, when no one could hear her sighs, were calling him. When no one could hear, her sighs were calling him. Her laugh was born of tears. And out of all they saw, her eyes formed the image of her beloved. She also burned in the fire of longing, but her flames were hidden, and no smoke rose from them. She lived between the water of her tears and the fire of her love. बहुत एंड जब आप इस डिटेल में जाते हो तो रियलाइज़ करते हो कि शायद बदकिस्मती में लैला ज़्यादा बदकिस्मत रही. Many a tellers have said that she died of a broken heart. मजनू ने दुनिया तो छोड़ दी, बट लैला में इंडल्ज करने के लिए उसने अपने को बतेरो टाइम दिया, स्पेस दिया, एवेन्यूज दिए, पोइट्री, सब कुछ. ही कुड इंडल्ज इन हिज लव. though it was not an easy task. I'm not taking away from that, but एटलीस्ट अपने प्यार में इंडल्ज तो कर सका, प्राइस पे किया, एंड ही गॉट द गुड्स एंड एन्जॉयड देम. उसने अपना सब कुछ छोड़ दिया, दुनिया छोड़ दी, घर बार छोड़ दिया. उसको लैला के साथ टाइम स्पेंड करना था, लैला ना सही तो लैला के ख्याल से ही. उसने पूरी ज़िंदगी अपनी वैसे बिताई. लैला ऑन द अदर हैंड, वो तो अपने आप से भी छुप छुप के बात कर सकती थी मजनू की. इतना ज़्यादा विजिलेंस, इतना ज़्यादा एवरीबडी वॉज ऑलवेज ऑन अ लुक आउट टू कैच हर. आगे के चैप्टर्स में आप पढ़ेंगे मजनू के बारे में पब्लिकली सोचना भी उसके लिए एक प्रॉब्लम हो गया था. वो रो नहीं सकती थी, वो दुख नहीं मना सकती थी, वो अपने चेहरे पे दुख ला नहीं सकती थी. एंड ये एक अलग टाइप की मजबूरी है. एंड थैंक्स टू निज़ामी वी गेट अ पीक इन टू इट, हाउ हेल्पलेस शी वॉज. एक होता है कि आपको खुशी करने का मौका नहीं मिला, एक होता है कि आपको दुखी होने का भी मौका नहीं दिया किस्मत ने, कि आप अपने दुख में इंडल्ज कर सकें. सो यहाँ पर आई वुड लाइक टू कोट अ पोएट नज़ीम अकबराबादी, जिनकी ट्रांसलेशन वर्सेस बाय पॉल स्मिथ में एक वर्स है which talks about Layla, and see how astutely he has captured this entire form of Layla which we are talking about, right, for herself, embedded in Majnun's love. I was perplexed, where now to go? Where does he dwell? Who to ask? How to find beloved? And on him be gazing. It was like this I was thinking, as like Majnu I wandered, and still not even a trace was I discovering of my beloved. So, लैला की सिचुएशन काफ़ी बुरी थी. पहली बात तो she was almost captured, imprisoned in her house. Beautiful वो इतनी थी कि line of suitors was just never ending. सो कैसे ना कहा जाता होगा, क्या किया जाता होगा, इज़ बियॉन्ड माई इमेजिनेशन. एंड दूसरी बात कि मजनू जिसमें उसकी जान अटकी थी, वो सब कुछ छोड़ के इतनी दूर चला गया. अब उसकी भी मजबूरी थी कि उसको जाना पड़ा, बट लैला का भी ये हाल हो गया था कि वो एक ऐसे शहर में, एक ऐसी माउंटेन वैली में थी जहाँ उसको पता था कि मजनून नहीं है. एंड दैट्स अ वेरी लोनली फीलिंग, नंबर वन. नंबर टू, उसको ये पता नहीं था कि मजनू कहाँ है. एड्स टू द लोनलीनेस. कैन वन इवन इमेजिन, वन कैनॉट इवन बिगिन टू इमेजिन हाउ लोनली and hopeless she must have felt. And this chapter makes you think about that. Now, lastly, in this chapter, Nizami introduces us to Layla the poetess. Beautifully, again. This is what Nizami writes. Thus, many a melody passed to and fro between the two nightingales, drunk with their passion. Born of pain and longing, their songs had the power to break the unhappiness of the world. And जब ये लाइन पढ़ रहे थे कि born of pain and longing, their songs had the power to break the unhappiness of the world, एकदम से दिल में ये ख्याल आया, was this the divine purpose? Was this the divine purpose for these immortal lovers? That despite their suffering and pain, out of their suffering and pain and trauma, will arise something that will heal the world, that will push the world. Anybody and everybody who hears about them will be inspired to think about love and happiness. हो सकता है कि यही इनका डिवाइन पर्पस था. But yeah, they paid a heavy price for it, for sure. And this is where that phenomena we sometimes discuss in the Ghazal podcast also, right? जब किस्मत आपको लोहा दे देती है, are you an alchemist who can transform it into gold? Can you see the potential of gold in the iron lying in front of you? गालिब के लिए भी हम लोग यही कहते हैं ना कि जितना किस्मत उनकी तरफ तकलीफ, दुख, लैक, लॉस भेजती थी, बंदा उसको ट्रांसफॉर्म करके कुछ ऐसा बना देता था जो कि सदियों सदियों तक लोग पढ़ पढ़ के इंस्पायर होंगे, मोटिवेट होंगे, प्यार के बारे में सोचेंगे, अच्छी बातें सोचेंगे, हौसला अफजाई पाएंगे. सदियों तक ऐसी चीज़ें लिख गया, स्टेमिंग आउट ऑफ दिस पेन. सो that thing clearly comes out here also. Their songs had the power to break the unhappiness of the world. Beautifully written. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed the narration and the impressions we did after that. If you did, please click like. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Share your comments and feedback. We are not even halfway through the book, but the more you read about it, the more clear one gets about the story. So many aspects which we were clueless about, right? So hopefully you guys are finding it interesting. Now, for any new viewers, as always, I will strongly recommend that you access the DGMZ introduction episode so that you know the motivation and inspiration behind this podcast. Also, for your awareness, we have many playlists running on the channel right now. The two main ones, number one is the diwan-e-ghalib episodes where we pick one ghazal from the diwan every weekend and share an impression around it. The bonus playlist consists of other topics, still Urdu poetry, still Mirza, events at DGMZ. Even this Layla-e-Majnun Miniseries is nested under the bonus episode playlist. So explore all the playlists. This week we also posted first of its kind, a playlist of songs which we curated. So those are DGMZ curated songs. We have put a video for you that talks about all the jazbaat, the diwan-e-ghalib kind of jazbaat from those songs, and then of course the songs for you to enjoy. So yeah, go to the channel homepage and see what all is there on offer, and feel free to access episodes which interest you. That's all I had for today. Sending lots of love and light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.